Hi, I'm Aurora Winter, and I'm so excited to share with you how to write your book in 12 weeks or less, and why every coach should write a book. Every coach, every consultant, every speaker, you need a book. I bet you've got one inside of you. Well, most of you know me as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy, but what you might not know about me is that I'm also an award-winning writer. I have a background as a film and television executive producer. In fact, I worked for Canada's largest film and television production and distribution company, which at that time was called Atlantis Films. In that capacity, I oversaw 250 hours of television programming. Whew, that was a lot. And I've also written some TV movies, including Eli's Lesson, which starred Jack Palance, and I got a couple of awards for screenwriting. You may probably know that I wrote the book From Heartbreak to Happiness, An Intimate Diary of Healing, which was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I've recently written Encouraging Words, The Peace Method, and Grief Relief in 30 Minutes. So I like writing. But what I'd like to share with you is how writing a book will just take your status as an expert to the next level. I mean, anybody can write a book, but so few people get it done. So when you get your book done, it sets you apart from the ordinary people, and it will take your income to the next level. If you have a book, you are an author, and an author is seen as an expert. So what kind of book do you want to write in order to establish your expertise as a coach, consultant, trainer, mentor, speaker? The kind of book you want to write is a non-fiction book. So a book of poetry or a screenplay or a dramatization of something that's fiction, these are not the kinds of books that you want to write. And that's good news too, because actually a nonfiction book is easier to write more quickly. I'm going to teach you how to write a book in 12 weeks or less, although quite honestly, I think some of these kinds of books you could write in a weekend or write in 30 days or less. But for those of you skeptics, I'm calling this How to Write Your Book in 12 Weeks or Less. You can do this, and it will totally change your income and the respect that people give you as an expert. So just for fun, Alan Francis wrote a book, Everything Men Know About Women, and it sold 1 million copies, and it was blank. So if he can sell 1 million copies of a book, Everything Men Know About Women, and there's nothing in it, you can write a book and you can sell many copies too. I think really the most important thing about the book is not how many copies you sell, but that it will establish you as an expert, and it will really increase your coaching fees and your fees as a speaker, as people respect authors as experts. Now you could go with a big publisher, but nowadays you can also self-publish online very easily at lulu.com or createspace.com, or there's lots of other print-on-demand sources where you can print as little as 1 copy of your book, so consider that as well. Okay, so how to write your book in 12 weeks or less. There's really 4 different kinds of books that can be done quickly, and I'm going to explain them to you in increasing order of difficulty. The easiest kind of book to write is a quote book. So my book, Encouraging Words, I wrote as an example of a quote book. And it's just a collection of quotes that inspire me along the theme of encouraging words, hence the title. I also wrote Encouraging Words because I wanted to be of service to the coaches at the Grief Coach Academy. And you can use the book Encouraging Words as a way to give your client a thought for the day as you start a coaching session. So after a quote book in increasing order of difficulty is like a tip book. So a tip books would be, 101 ways to have fun, or 50 ways to travel joyfully with your autistic child, that kind of thing. So a tip book is just short tips, and it takes a little longer to write than a quote book, which you could probably pull together this weekend, but it doesn't take as long as some of the other kinds of books. So consider writing a tip book. The third kind of book to write is an interview book. Ageless by Suzanne Summers is an example of this kind of book. She's written many books on health, but she's not a doctor. But what she does is she interviews doctors and other medical professionals about health, either about bioidentical hormones, about recovering from cancer. So she does it on a theme, and then she writes the introduction and the summary, and of course put some of her own stories in there because she's interviewing people. So you can write an interview book by interviewing people and transcribing those audios, and then you've got a book. So that's the third kind of book that you can write fairly quickly and is very much appreciated, an interview book. And then the fourth most difficult time-wise kind of book to write is sort of the 5 to 10 main points book. So the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey is an example of that kind of book. My current book, Grief Relief in 30 Minutes, is an example of that kind of book as I walk through the 5 steps of the peace method. So each step is one thing, so that's like 5 main chapters. So you can consider sort of a 5 to 10 main point book is another kind of book that you can write in 12 weeks or less. So although From Heartbreak to Happiness, An Intimate Diary of Healing is a great book, I wrote it, I like it very much, it's not on this list because it usually takes longer than 12 weeks to really do a justice to an autobiography or a memoir. So I don't actually recommend that you write that kind of book. It's not the fastest kind of book to write, and also it has some dangers associated with it because we want to be talking, this is the marketing module, we want to be talking what's in it for me, what's in it for the reader, and if you don't write your autobiography or your memoir with the right kind of writing, it can seem like it's way too much about you and not enough of service to the reader. So don't recommend that for a novice writer as your first book. I recommend one of these other 4 kinds of books that I have suggested. Okay, so how can you pull together your book in the 12 weeks or less? Let me give you a practical step-by-step plan for what you should do each week. So as you're coming to write your book, really think about what has your life been a unique laboratory for, and how can that help other people? What do you know now that you wished you had known 5 or 10 years ago? How could your wiser self today shave the learning curve on your old self? And maybe that is part of a book. So then choose a really narrow topic, and most likely this is going to be the same as your coaching niche. So if you want to become the go-to expert for other people who are dealing with sibling loss, it makes sense that your book would be about sibling loss and how to recover it. If you want to become the go-to expert for traveling joyfully with your autistic child, then your book would be about traveling joyfully with your autistic child. Maybe a 50-tip book on how to do that. So really make your book around your area of expertise so that you become the go-to expert, and your book is your calling card and your proof, so to speak, that that is your expertise. You also might want to write a book about late parenting if you're choosing to coach and mentor people around the joys and challenges of late parenting. So think about whatever your expertise is or what you're choosing to become an expert in, and write your book on that same topic. That way it will support your expert status. So what you want to do is break it down into a list of things to do each week for 12 weeks, and boom, your book will be done. The first thing I recommend is that you set aside a regular time to write each and every day. For me, morning is my best time, but what is it for you? When are you your most creative? Set aside a half an hour, maybe even 15 minutes. If it's first thing in the morning, last thing at night, maybe over your lunch hour, you'd be amazed how much you can get done, even if you allocate 15 minutes a day. So that's the first thing that I recommend that you do. Then in week 1, you want to cluster your main idea. So maybe you put at the center of a big piece of paper, traveling joyfully with autistic children. And then you've got that main idea. And then spokes will come off of that. Maybe spokes will come off traveling to Disneyland. Maybe you had an experience there. Traveling mishaps, bad things to avoid. Vomiting in the back seat of the car, what to do about that. Little tips about traveling with friends and family. Little tips about bringing snacks in the car, tips about traveling to Niagara Falls. You had an experience there. So you just let the ideas flow. That's all you do in the first week. Then week 2, you look at each one of these clustered things and you see that Niagara Falls could be a whole chapter. You see the thing about avoiding vomiting in the car, that's part of the tips. So you get all of these things, and if you're writing a 50-tip book, you may have 50 different tips and thoughts. Some of these spokes like Niagara Falls may have 5 or 6 other ideas that came out of that trip, but some, like vomiting in the car, may only have crackers, and there's not a lot, to go with that, so it's just one tip. So just cluster and have fun and see what you've got. So that's what I recommend that you do on week 2. So then what you do for the next 3 to 7 weeks is you just write one of your tips or one of your chapters each week. If you're writing a tip book, you will write more than one tip a week. You can probably bang out one a day, not a problem. If you're writing the 5 to 10 keys book, then you will have subpoints. So each chapter would have some subpoints. So if you are the go-to person for dealing with sibling loss, you might have some subpoints around the funeral. Then you might have a whole chapter around the funeral and some subpoints there. Or if you're wanting to share with people about the joys and challenges of late parenting, you might have one chapter on the history of late parents and talk about all the royalty and kings who had 500 wives and gazillion children, and talk about Larry King, and just have a whole chapter around history. So that would be an example of what you would be doing from weeks 3 to 7. So I love this quote from T.S. Eliot. He said, "If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter." So now is the time to remember you don't have to write a long book. Nowadays, people are pressed for time. They actually appreciate a short book. So get to the point, and don't be thinking you need to put everything you know into your book. You don't. Your book is the appetizer. You are the full meal deal. Coaching with you, coming to your events, hearing you speak. That's what is the full meal deal. So your book is just an appetizer. So let go of the idea that you have to get all your wisdom into your book. That'll take more than 12 weeks. And we want you to get this book done, because you know what? You've got more than one book in you. And I'd like to encourage you to write that one too. So in week 8, you've now got the beginnings of a manuscript. On week 8, I recommend you get a quote book. Don't start by getting a quote book, because that can just be a rabbit hole that can take a whole bunch of time. But on week 8, get a quote book and add some quotes to add a little spice and sugar to your manuscript. Put some quotes in there, or some statistics, or some facts. Just add, some layers of information. That's what you do on week 8. You get a quote book and you sprinkle some quotes into your manuscript if you like quotes. So on week 9, you put your editor hat on. You print the whole thing out, you check for typos, you check for spelling, you look at flow, you look at chapter 3 is only 5 pages and chapter 7 is 50 pages. Maybe you got to do something there. You maybe think, well, chapter 3 actually should be chapter 4 and I should flip things around. So just put your editor hat on, read the whole thing from start to finish, balance it out, make sure the sequence makes sense. That's the time to now check the spelling, check the facts. I also really urge you to not have the editor hat on while you are being creative. What I do when I'm writing, if I need a quote or I need a statistic, I just put 3 asterisks, and then I can search for all the asterisks and I can look it up later. The reason why I really recommend this, it's a different side of your brain that's creative. So it's the 4-year-old that's playing in the sandbox that's coming up with all these juicy ideas. And the editor is like a stern, teacher. So you don't want the school teacher to be whacking the 4-year-old's fingers with her ruler. They don't play well together. So keep your creative, playful energy separate from your editor. Don't edit your first draft. Just let it flow. You have great wisdom and insight inside of you, and you really want to bring that playfulness out. So don't bring the editor out until about week 9. And then in week 10, you want to give your manuscript to some trusted readers. Hopefully these are people who would be in your target market. So if you're writing a book around how to travel joyfully with your autistic child, it would make sense to give it to other parents who have autistic children. It wouldn't make sense to give it to your 17-year-old to read, no matter how much you think he's good at English, because unless you're just asking him to check for typos, right, you want to give it to somebody who is going to benefit from the book, who is in your target market. So give it to a few trusted readers. It's best if they're not too close to you, because you want an honest opinion. So while they're reading it and giving you that fresh eye, because you only get one chance to make a first impression, so you want to not give the same manuscript to the same person to read dozens of times. They won't be able to give you the fresh perspective just only the one time, the first time they can give that to you. So while they are reading it, you are going to write some other parts. You're going to write the introduction, and you're going to write the about the author. Perhaps you'll write the summary. So you'll continue doing other writing work while they are reading your manuscript. You'll be working on things with your marketing eye. So how can I create this book to be a more compelling, more engaging from a marketing point of view? How can I make sure that people actually go visit my website, or they call this number, or can I think of any things like that? So that's the kind of editing that you'll be doing while some trusted friends and associates are reading your manuscript. And then week 11, you're almost done, just one more week to go. You're going to receive that feedback. You're going to incorporate those suggestions that you agree with, or those suggestions that more than one person has come up with. If they all said chapter 3 at 5 pages was too short, maybe they're onto something. But if you and your heart really disagree, it's your book. Be true to your voice, be true to your passion, because you don't want a book by committee. You want the book to have your voice, your truth, your wisdom. So trust your gut, trust your voice. But if more than one person says the same thing, maybe they're right. So have a look at that. And then in week 12, you bring it all together. That's the final polish, the final edit. Bring everything together. Get your cover designer working on the cover. And then, boom, you've got a book. You can upload a PDF to various print-on-demand sites, such as createspace.com, which is owned by Amazon, or lulu.com, or various other places. And you can then get just one copy printed that you can edit and proof, make sure that the pages are on the right side, make sure the color of the cover worked out well. By the way, you can find cover designers online at elance.com or craigslist.com, or your local high school computer lab may have some geeks that could help you, or the graphic arts students at the local college may want to help you. Anyway, so there's lots of resources. Don't do it all yourself. Just do things that are easy and play to your core strengths, and delegate the rest. So that's a quick summary of how you can write your book in 12 weeks or less. I really urge you to write a book. Anybody can write a book, but so few people actually get it done. I'd love you to be one of those people who gets their book done, because the difference between struggling as a coach or a speaker and really making 6 or 7 figures is leveraging your time, leveraging your impact, leveraging your influence. And I can't think of a better way to do that than having a book. Having a book sets you apart. It gives you that expert status because you are an author. So use that, and I really invite you, I urge you to write your book in 12 weeks or less, and you can really use that